Anthropic, the company behind Claude, faces at least a $1.5 billion settlement for their copyright infringement. If approved, this would represent the biggest copyright settlement in history and really has major implications for artificial intelligence going forward. So what happened? What did they do? Did they do it intentionally? And what does this mean for the rest of the industry? Let's get into it. And this video is brought to you by Sokosumi. More on them later. So here is the case document. As you can see here, we have the plaintiffs and Anthropic Public Benefit Corporation, the defendant. The first sentence, the largest publicly reported copyright recovery in history, larger than any other copyright class action settlement or any individual copyright case litigated to final judgment. This is massive. And so here's the gist of what happens, but I'm going to dive into the details. Anthropic took pirated books that they thought would be fair use and used it to train their models. Turns out, it wasn't fair use according to the judge. It will set a precedent of AI companies paying for their use of pirated websites like Library Genesis and Pirate Library Mirror. So basically, if you're an AI company, you're using a pirated website, that is not free use. And listen to how severe this is. Anthropic's use of pirated material inherently, irredeemably infringing. There is no doubt in the judge's mind they did something wrong here. And the plaintiff's core allegation is that Anthropic committed large-scale copyright infringement by downloading and commercially exploiting these books from allegedly pirated datasets. So the breakdown is they downloaded books from pirate websites without permission. They did that to obtain a huge amount of training data for their Claude family of models. Now, Anthropic argued it was fair use, but the court rejected that argument. And how did they even find out? Well, the plaintiffs figured it out through discovery. They had a sense this is what's happening, and they went into discovery and looked in the dataset, and yes, there it was. Over the course of the case, plaintiffs took and defended 20 depositions, reviewed hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, conducted inspections of at least 3 terabytes of training data. That is not a small task. So the depositions, the dataset inspections, and metadata tracing tied Anthropic's dataset back to those illegally downloaded book datasets. And because of that, they are going to have to pay at least $1.5 billion. That is a massive amount. And for context, Anthropic literally just raised a ton of money. And in fact, all of the investors likely knew about this settlement. So they just raised $13 billion Series F at a $183 billion post-money valuation. So at least $1.5 billion of that is going straight into the plaintiff's pockets. But of course, the investors don't care. They just see that as the cost of doing business, I suppose. But it's not over. Anthropic doesn't just get to have that data and have the models. It goes a little bit deeper than that. But first, let's get into the details of the payment. On a per work basis, the settlement amount is 4 times larger than $750 statutory damages amount that a jury could award, and 15 times larger than the $200 amount if Anthropic were to prevail on its defense of innocent infringement. And here's how they have to pay. $300 million due within 5 business days after the court's preliminary approval order. $300 million due within 5 business days after the court's final approval order. $450 million plus interest due within 12 months of the court's preliminary approval. So they are also paying interest, which amounts to above $100 million. Continuing, $450 million plus interest due within 24 months. And the interest earned by the time of Anthropic's final payment may be as high as $126.40 million. And let me just pause for a second and thank the sponsor of today's video. Finally, we have an AI agent marketplace that makes sense. Sokosumi just launched, and it is your place to hire your next AI agent teammate. So if you're building or hiring AI agents, Listen to this. Sokasumi is easy to use and solves real problems. You can set up company accounts and instantly deploy AI agents for your business, and instantly deploy high-quality AI agents for your enterprise. And if you're a builder, you can build AI agents and monetize them by selling them to other enterprises. And you can be an indie coder or enterprise developer to do so. And here's what makes Sokasumi special. It is completely agnostic. OpenAI, Gemini, Mistral, whatever LLM you want to use, it'll work. And you can also use the frameworks that you're already familiar with, from LangChain to Crew AI, and any other orchestration or tool that you want to use. Plus, it is fully open source, which you know I love, so you get all the transparency you want. And every agent already uses MCP through the Masumi protocol. This is the marketplace for AI agents at scale. So register at sokasumi.com and get 200 starting credits right now. Use the code in the description below. So if you're building agents, managing agents, definitely check this out. Let me know what you think of this, and let me know how it helps your business. Thanks again to Sokasumi. Now, back to the video. Now, this is not a small amount of books. That is why these settlement amounts are so large. Listen to this. If the works list ultimately exceeds 500,000 books, then Anthropic will pay an additional $3,000 per work that Anthropic adds to the works list above 500,000 works. The 1.5 billion is the minimum size of the settlement. And by doing the settlement, they get a release, but the release is restricted in itself. Listen to this. The release is limited in 3 critical respects. First, the release extends only to past claims and does not extend to any claims for future reproduction, distribution, and/or creation of derivative works. Of course, that makes sense. If they continue doing the bad thing, they will continue to get dinged for it. Second, the release does not pertain to output claims at all. So imagine this. You've trained your model. You don't have to destroy the model, but if the model reproduces work from one of those books near verbatim, they will get sued again. And third, the settlement only releases claims for works on the works list. And so if one of the plaintiffs owns multiple works and only one of the works is on the list, another one is not, they're not liable for the one that is not, at least not yet. That's a separate claim. Now, here's the interesting bit. Anthropic must destroy the pirated books, the files, any copy of those files, and make sure that there's proof that they destroyed it. Here, Anthropic has committed to destroy the datasets within 30 days of final judgment. So this really prevents Anthropic from reusing those copyrighted works. But Claude remains trained. You cannot untrain it from a specific part of the dataset. And lucky for Anthropic, they didn't make them destroy the model and create it again. That would essentially sink Anthropic overnight. All right, so who's actually going to get paid here? All beneficial or legal copyright owners of the exclusive right to reproduce copies of the book in the versions of LibGen or Polimi downloaded by Anthropic. And here's the thing. This wasn't accidental. Anthropic intentionally downloaded these pirated books thinking that it was actually fair use, but it wasn't. And why did they do that? Well, of course, to save a bunch of money. Imagine Anthropic having to purchase the rights to all 500,000 books. It would have been insanely expensive, but they're not the first ones to do this. Google Books was a project that Google had, obviously, where they went out, bought used copies of books, scanned them, and then put them online for free. And that was completely legal because they didn't download pirated versions for free. They went out and actually purchased the books. Now, whether or not they were reproducing the books for commercial purposes, which I'm not a lawyer, but I believe is part of the fair use or not fair use determination, is up for debate. Google wasn't charging for the books as far as I remember, but just getting more eyeballs to Google, it definitely benefited them. All right, and where do we go from here? The settlement is not final yet. They still need preliminary approval, then the notice goes out, then the final approval hearing, and then payments start only after that. All right, so what's the bigger picture here for AI? This is definitely sending shockwaves through the AI industry. And again, let me go back to this quote. This settlement will set a precedent of AI companies paying for their use of pirated websites like Library Genesis and Pirate Library. This settlement would also be the first major recovery in any of the copyright actions pending against large AI companies nationwide. Remember, the New York Times is, I believe, still suing OpenAI for similar reasons. Now, this is all a fair use argument, and it's really going to change the economics of building a foundation model. If fair use becomes more difficult to argue, these AI companies are going to have to pay a lot more to train their models, and that's going to have downstream effects to all of us, the consumers of these models. So we're going to see a shift away from these gray market data set acquisition paths, and we're going to see much more licensed data being used. And we're also going to see probably price increases for really valuable, important, and legal data sets. Think Reddit, Twitter, all of the user-generated content, New York Times, Washington Post, all of the publishers out there. These works will become just so much more valuable. AI model companies will also spend a lot more money looking through the data sets and making sure that the data sets are all legal. And even a single work didn't make it accidentally into a data set that they acquired legally. This also puts more risk on the investor's plate because they're plowing money into these AI companies. But if there are these multi-billion-dollar settlements ahead and it all of a sudden becomes so much more costly to build these models, investors have to do different calculus to make it make sense for their ROI. So in closing, Anthropic definitely acquired these books illegally. They did so thinking it was fair use. It was judged that it wasn't, and now they're paying the biggest settlement of all time for a copyright claim. Let me know what you think in the comments. And once again, thank you to Soko Sumi for sponsoring this video. Links down in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.